It's been over 2 years since I've left the UK because of COVID. After several failed attempts because of quarantining rules, I was finally able to fly from Manchester to Tenerife in the Canary Islands for a winter bikepacking adventure on my favourite volcanic island. Thank you very much for watching my film. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and any comments or questions, stick them in the comments box. So this is my first international bikepacking film on this channel. It's been a very long time since I've been abroad, and it was such a relief to escape the cold British weather just for 1 week and enjoy the sun in Tenerife. It's been such a long time coming, and I'm really glad I did it. So I flew from Manchester to Tenerife South, and I brought my bike with me. It's about £50 each way to take a big bike box on the plane. I was flying with EasyJet. It might be a little bit more with other providers, but it's something I've really enjoyed doing over recent years because it allows me to have all of my stuff with me, stuff that I'm familiar with. You know, the brakes are on the correct side when you go to different countries. Sometimes they switch the brakes, which can make things very sketchy. I know the bike's going to fit me, and it's a lot cheaper than renting a bike. And of course it can carry all of my stuff as well because it's got the pannier racks on there. I got that bike box for like 100 quid or something several years ago, and because of its size it allows you to pack all your clothes in there as well. And for me, I think it's the best way of taking your bike abroad. The only issue you've got with it is that once you've unpacked the bike, you've still got the box and you've got to do something with it. So you've either got the option of trying to store it somewhere, or in my case, booking a hostel for a whole week and kind of using that as a base. So when I arrived in Tenerife, it was lovely and warm. It was in the low 20s, which is just right for cycling in my opinion. But there was a slight issue with the weather in that they were having something called the Calima. It's like a phenomenon that happens quite regularly, to be honest. It can happen at any month in the Canary Islands. And what it effectively is it's the sand from the Moroccan desert, the Sahara Desert, that gets blown over the islands, and it causes quite a lot of haze, and it doesn't make for easy breathing either. It can affect the air quality quite a lot. So the visibility wasn't great, but the weather was. So I had planned to stay in a hostel. It was the Drago Nest Hostel, which I've stayed in before a couple of times actually, pre-pandemic of course. I used that as a bit of a base, to be honest, because I flew my bike out there. It had all my equipment in it, my camera equipment. As opposed to finding somewhere to store that, I thought, well, I'll kind of kill two birds with one stone. I'll use the hostel as a place to store my stuff, but I've also got a base then to kind of come back, charge my batteries, and if I want to sleep there as well, I've got that option, obviously, because I paid for it. The hostel is really, really nice. It's incredibly cheap, as all hostels tend to be, but you got breakfast included in it as well. So it's somewhere that I keep coming back to. I've had a great experience there. The staff are always really friendly. And for the price you pay, I think it's fantastic. It's on the northwest of the island, so away from the tourists. You tend to get a lot of British tourists in the south because they just want to go for the sunshine, and it's always sunnier in the south. But the north, in my opinion, is some of the best parts of the island because it's much more lush, much more green, and fewer foreigners as well. You just get the locals. It just feels a little bit more Spanish. So it's somewhere I absolutely love, and I can't wait to go back. So day one, I did a little bit of a loop. My plan was to go down to Santiago de Teide, which is just on the edge of the road up to Mount Teide, which is that prominent volcano that you'll have seen throughout the film. It's quite obvious. You can see it from pretty much any Canary Island. It's very, very large. One of the highest volcanoes in Europe, in fact. So it's, yeah, you can't miss it. The weather started to turn a little bit on the first day. It was a little bit chillier than I expected. It was quite windy, and there was the threat of rain, and eventually it did rain as I got into the woodland. Funnily enough, the woodland was called the Corona Forest, which was a bit ironic. However, the trails in there are fantastic. I'm really glad I did that. I did make the mistake of running quite thin tyres compared to what I normally run. They were 32s, which probably isn't enough. There were slicks as well to do those sort of trails. So in hindsight, I wish I'd brought some fatter tyres just for that. Or if I was going to come back and just do those trails, I would recommend getting some larger gravel tyres if you can. Because I was a little bit reckless on the trails, I ended up getting a puncture on day one, and then it was raining, so I felt like, to be honest, that day wasn't as good as I was hoping, but I made the most of it, and it's definitely a place that I would like to visit again. So on day two, my plan was to cycle up the volcano, Mount Teide. I've done this a couple of times before. It's very, very hard. It's incredibly long ascent. It can be 30, 35 miles depending on which way you go, but continuous uphill. I think I did something like 7,000 feet of climbing in 30 miles, which is double what I would consider to be a challenging ride. So it was a long day in the saddle. I was carrying all my equipment as well, so I did pace myself. The great thing about going up Mount Teide is you kind of get varying landscapes as well. So you start off near the sea level where it's quite warm, and then as you work your way up, you start to see lava formations, pine forests, and it's just different depending on which way you go up. And eventually you start to sort of go above the tree line, and the altitude definitely starts to kick in. So it's something that you just got to be aware of. I was struggling when I got to the top. I drunk all my water, pretty much ate all my food as well, even though I kept filling up on the way up. So when I eventually found somewhere to camp, I was a little bit dehydrated, to be honest, and it made the journey, the last couple of hours up, a little bit strenuous. So you aren't allowed to fly a drone in the Teide National Park. So I didn't do that. It is illegal. You can get fined, I think it's €6,000, which seems a bit excessive, to be honest. But all of that drone footage that I took was just outside the borders. I made sure of that. Obviously, would have been quite an expensive holiday if I'd have got that wrong. So I made sure that all of that footage was outside the park. There are also some good places to camp up Mount Teide and in and around that location. There are some kind of wild camping spots that the Spanish government has outlined, and you can book them. They're completely free. You just need to make sure you've booked them in advance. Now, the one I was planning on staying at, it wouldn't let me book for some reason. So my plan was to kind of just rock up and hope that someone would let me stay, seeing as it is free, and I just had a small tent and it's just me. But I got to the gate and they were obviously doing refurbishment because it was completely shut. You couldn't get in at all. So I ended up having to wild camp just off there in the forest, sort of out the way. Now, as a side note, Mount Teide is one of the best places in Europe to take photos of the stars because it's so high up. There's very little in the way of light pollution. So you end up getting a fantastic view. I've been up there a couple of times before at night. It was one of my favourite places to visit to take photos of the stars. And my plan was to do the same on this trip. But as I got to the top, the winds really did pick up. It was incredibly windy at the top. And to make matters worse, I set up the camera, and because you've got to leave the shutter open for quite a long time to take good photos of the stars, the wind makes it wobble slightly on the tripod, and then you end up with blurry shots. But like I say, to make things worse, the moon then appeared, and it was incredibly bright. It was a full moon, and it kind of washed the stars out of the picture, so it ended up not being as good a view as I would have liked. I was hoping to get a really magnificent star lapse before bed, but unfortunately, one of those things you can't control, and I didn't get the opportunity. Right, so day 3, I woke up really early because it hadn't been an easy night's sleep, I'll be honest. The wind was making sleeping quite a challenge. There was quite a breeze in the tent. Even with all my gear on, it's quite cold up there. Even it's a warm country, but up there it's incredibly cold. So I packed up and then I carried on to the very peak of Mount Teide, as far as you can get on the road anyway. Because I was quite dehydrated, like I mentioned, it took me a lot longer than I would have hoped. I was crawling, going really, really slow, maybe like 5 miles an hour at times with all that stuff. I happened to see a lot of professional cyclists up there, which is quite a common place for professional cyclists to train. I saw the whole of FDJ, which is a French cycling team, and they were training up there. They're all really friendly, actually. I think everyone was a bit confused as to why I had so much stuff and I climbed up that volcano. They probably thought I was mad. But it was really nice to see them on their really nice, expensive bikes. And once I finally got to the top, I stopped off for a bit of a rest at the Hotel Parador, which is where, again, a lot of the professionals train because it's at altitude. Once I'd done that, it was a lovely long descent down to where I was going. I went down to La Orotava, and from there I carried on through the little villages down to Icod De Los Vinos, which is where I was staying in that hostel. So the following day, my plan was to cycle to the most westerly point on the island, and it's an old lighthouse called Punta De Teno, and it's famed for its incredible sunsets because it's on the west, and because it's kind of on a rocky landscape, you get incredible coastline as well. So it was something I was really looking forward to going to. I've tried going there before, but the road in recent years seemed to have closed, and I can't seem to work out why. If you do know, put it in the comments, I'd love to know. You can't drive down there, so the last time I was there I tried to drive all the way. There is a road, but for some reason they weren't letting cars pass. So I thought, well, I know you're allowed to walk down there, so surely I'll be able to cycle there. But when I arrived to the final point, just before getting onto that road, there was a big sign saying they were doing some sort of works, and bikes, walkers, anybody couldn't use the road. So I was a little bit disappointed. I was really hoping to end the film with a fantastic sunset time lapse and drone flying along the coastline, but unfortunately, again, it's one of those things you just can't control. I've had to miss out on that. I hope you enjoyed that film. It's something I want to do more of this year, hoping that travel restrictions keep on easing. I've got a few more in the pipeline, as well as lots more bikepacking adventures here in the UK. I hope you enjoyed that video. Please share it with your friends if you did, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you like my videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.